Recording. Call the meeting to order at 4 p.m.
Yep.
Roll call for the committee. We have Bob Bastinto and Roy Gott co-chairs, Sandy Fortin and Tom Toll, and we have Amber Bloom from Island Institute, it looks like. Thank you all for being here. Hoping that Kendra Jo is going to join us, since that's the big focus today. But given that there's an item on the agenda that shouldn't be there, the outreach presentation at Hammond Hall. So we'll just cross that off. Review and approval of prior meeting minutes, May 22nd, 2024. Did everybody on the committee get a chance to review those? Any corrections, suggestions, omissions?
It looked good to me.
All right. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
All right. We have a plethora of both motions and seconds. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, update of action steps from prior meeting. We'll just go over really briefly the outreach event. I thought it was generally a pretty good showing, good crowd, good questions. We had, let me share.
And Roy, just a quick update. I only have this space that I'm borrowing until 5 o'clock. We'll probably be through everything, but just a heads up.
Oh, where you're physically at right now?
I'm on the road borrowing a library space, so.
Okay. That's fine. I don't think we're going to be here that long, especially if Kendra Jo doesn't show up. But
Yep.
All right, I just wanted to, here we go, bring up this list. This is our list of attendees who actually signed up, or people on Zoom who didn't put their names in, so I just had to pull it out of the report. So this does include committee members, but still better than I think our last two are prior to outreach events, not as many as the first one, but still a decent crowd.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, like I said, good questions asked for the most part. There were some interesting ones that weren't really germane to what we're doing, but for the most part, we had a good group. Any thoughts from the three of you about how that went?
I thought it went, my personal feeling, I thought it went very, very well. I really did. The turnout was far greater than I expected, considering the one at Gouldsboro, where we only had a few people. Very, very well. What I noticed is there's a person who was there who didn't sign in, so could probably add one more.
There are probably a couple people who didn't get recorded.
Yeah. Was that Alan?
Yep.
Yeah.
That was Al.
Which one was Alan?
Oh,
he was the chatty one, a little bit off subject.
The one, yeah, 5G and so forth.
The 5G, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Belanger? I don't remember his last name. Do you know, Bob?
No, I don't. I just call him Alan.
He's a Winter Harbor resident on Newman Street.
He's a Winter Harbor resident on Newman Street. Okay, well, let's see here.
I would just make a comment about attendees and how we're tracking this, only because this has come up with the Winter Harbor Comprehensive Plan about considering who's attending our outreach events. It comes up frequently asking, are they actually a registered voter, or are they just people that happen to be summering or living in the community? Just a FYI, putting it out there that's been a question come up repeatedly at Winter Harbor meetings.
Well, I would say to that we could certainly provide lists like this, and then, I mean, we don't have a way, I mean, obviously we could ask for the information, but in arrears, they
Right.
could have to compare it against voter registration or something else of
Yeah.
that
Mm.
nature. But
Okay.
Yeah, and I know
Or
we're
even-
making our effort to reach out to registered voter, because that's typically who we're sending newsletters and posting responses and whatnot to. So I think we're
Well,
covering all our bases. It's just an awareness.
Yep. Tom, thoughts?
Oh, I agree that I thought it went very well. I was very surprised.
Masonry.
Okay.
I was very surprised on the number of people who showed up. So I thought that was great.
Let me just mute this.
So, I don't,
Can you
No.
mute me? I'm sorry, please.
I will attempt to mute you, Bob. How's that?
Very good, thank you.
Let's see. Hey, look at that. It worked. So I don't know that we need to do anything specific coming out of this outreach, but to me, it was again just the main point was just to bring people up to speed with where we were and what the roadmap forward looked like, and I think we succeeded with that. And the video has been posted and an update sent out over email, so I think we're good until we have more information to present. So unless there's anything else people want to speak to about the outreach event, Kendra Jo is here, and I would be thrilled to hear what updates, if any, she has about BEAD.
There we go. Hello, Yeed. So thank you. First off, thank you all for having me. It's been a little bit since I've been able to join you all. Speed is the topic of the hour, or of the last 6 months and the next 12 months, it seems. So, just to explain my acronym, BEAD is Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. This is funded through the oh man, what year was that? 2021, 2022, 2022? Bipartisan infrastructure law, and Maine is allocated out of that $272 million that prioritizes last mile connection for broadband serviceable locations that are federally defined as unserved and underserved, or in Maine's definitions, no connection and unserved. So really any location across the state that is within the FCC map that has a broadband serviceable location at the address, which is, can be a building, it can be a barn, it needs to be a structure, it can be a business, residential or business. It cannot just be an open plot of land with nothing there. There has to be a physical location. But all of those locations that have less than 100 over 20. I am going to I'm gonna share at least one slide, hopefully.
I'm gonna have to turn on screen sharing, I
Yeah.
think.
Great, that would be fantastic. I think it might be best if I just do this.
Give it a shot.
instead. All right, let's see. Yes, nailed it. Okay, should be seeing a web page. So this is live on our website right now. I can share the link in the chat afterwards, but I just wanted to walk you through this timeline a little bit. So we submitted our initial proposals, volumes 1 and 2, in December of 2023. So what that did was we had to, in 2 volumes, break down where we were going to be targeting these funds, the locations, how we were going to identify the locations, how we were going to create a challenge process to ensure that the data and the maps that we were utilizing through the FCC were as accurate as we could make them in partnership with residents, municipalities, ISPs, our state agency, vendors and subcontractors. And in volume 2, so it's kind of volume 1 is like, how are we going to do it? Volume 2 is what are we going to do with those funds? So our approach to the subgrantee selection process, which is what NTIA and the BEAD program calls it, basically, how are we going to deploy these funds to ensure that all of the locations across the state of Maine are served by high-speed broadband access or internet connectivity? There's a prioritization for how you deploy those funds. And I apologize if I'm repeating things that some of you already know, but I'm sure that a refresher is always welcome for most. But the charge from the NTIA and Congress is that we prioritize those unserved, less than 25 megabits per second download, and 3 megabits per second upload locations first. So we address all of those unserved locations first. Once we've served all of those or have a plan to serve all of those, then we can move into the underserved. So again, federally defined underserved, which is less than 100 megabits per second download, 20 megabits per second upload. If we have funding remaining, then they outline some other additional pieces of work that we could utilize those funds for: workforce, digital equity, and so forth. As we've worked through this process, as other funding has been deployed, both from the FCC, from MCA, Maine Connectivity Authority, as well as private builds that we've been tracking and collecting data on, we feel pretty strongly that the funding that we have, that $272 million, is going to address all of those locations that we've identified. What we've been doing for the past 6 months, after we've submitted the initial proposals, those had to go through a rigorous curing process where we've had a lot of feedback from NTIA. We've drafted, we've updated. We did receive our volume 2 or a volume 1 approval from NTIA in, I apologize, I don't think I explained what the NTIA is, but the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. We received that approval in February, which allowed us to kick off our challenge process, the service location challenge process. So in doing so, we took all of those points across the state of Maine. We had speed testing, we had data input from ISPs. We ourselves had our data collection team challenge locations. So particularly locations that were flagged as served. We wanted to ensure that they were underserved or unserved in the map so we could deploy funding to them, or locations that were showing up as underserved but really were unserved and wanting to prioritize. This was not a time to try to challenge if locations existed on the map. That's an ongoing process where constantly locations are being updated and added to the map. This was really about service at those locations and if they were receiving the service that was outlined or acknowledged by the FCC. We are currently in the rebuttal phase of that challenge process, state-led challenge process, where we are going through all of those challenges. I believe we got around 70,000 challenges. So going through those challenges, and then we'll have to adjudicate them. We have to explain which ones we are not accepting and which ones we are accepting, and then we need to approval phase for that with NTIA. Last week, we received our volume 2 approval from NTIA. I feel like you're the first community I get to say it's not draft anymore. It's real. And so in doing that approval, that allows us to start planning the subgrantee selection process, which I think is really the piece that most communities are kind of waiting for and trying to understand, which is what is the process we're going to put in place to get funding to an eligible applicant to bring service to those last mile locations. When we received the volume 2 approval last week, what that did was kick off a timeline. So the way NTIA built the BEAD program is everything's kind of based on these X number of day timelines, and one thing triggers the next. So when we received our approval for volume 2, it triggered a 365 or 1 year time period until our final report is due. So in between that approval and our final proposal being submitted, we have to go through the entire subgrantees pre-qualification and selection process. We have to recommend and approve awards. And then we need to compile all of those approvals and solutions into a final proposal that NTIA then has to review and approve in order for us to enter contract, implementation, build, connections. So the BEAD process is fairly lengthy, with a lot of moments where the federal government, the federal agency being NTIA, is stepping in and reviewing and checking to ensure that the charge that was given of connecting individual locations, trying to connect all remaining locations, is moving forward and is being met. I feel like the what I want to make sure, so these are the two proposals, about 80 pages. So if anyone has free time and you want to sit down with a cold glass of water and an initial proposal, feel free. But all of that information's there, the scoring, etc. There'll be a lot more public engagement as we head into the subgrantee selection process. And especially now that volume 2 is approved, because it's not draft anymore, right? It's real. We can actually speak to it and it holds true. I want to stop sharing. I know this is a lot of information, so I'm going to pause before I start to outline what the subgrantee selection process is and where community points of intersection are. I just want to check in and see if you all have any questions up until now. It's like drinking through a fire hose, so I just want to right size fit that. Yeah, Sandy.
You may answer this eventually. You talked about the 365-day timeline. It just immediately puts me into the thought of our town meeting is like in that time frame, or it may not fall in that time frame, and how will that impact eligibility?
It depends on the approach and model that you're looking at it. So let's talk about that a little bit. So in the subgrantee selection process, well, so we are going through this challenge phase. What that challenge phase informs is project service areas. We are tasked with defining project service areas. So all of the locations across the state have to be in a project service area so that an eligible applicant can bid on that project service area. It can be as small as one location, and in some cases that will be the case. When we're looking at the map, we see, one premise in the North Woods, really far out, right? And so we're not going to try to make a huge project service area to capture it. They will be a project service area. Within those project service area, 80% of those locations do need to be on or underserved. They need to qualify for the funding. So there are some parameters that they give us around creating those project service areas. And right now our team has been drafting based on the challenge process, but also real-time information coming in from providers. So we've actively been building X, where you can remove those points. In, I believe, August will be the first time we publicly display the draft project service areas for feedback with our August 9th board meeting. I'll confirm that as we get closer, but right now I think that's the internal working timeline. And so because it's a public meeting, that'll be the first time that folks really see it. But I think it'll be the first real visual and tactile piece of this process where communities can kind of see the locations, where they fall, what that looks like, right? And how many project service areas are falling into your region or your community, and how they're shaping up. After we've approved our project service areas, we will have to enter into a pre-qualification period with which will be open to anyone that is interested in looking to apply for BEAD. That can be ISPs, large, small, that can be wireless and wired ISPs, those that are already operating in the state, those that are interested in beginning to operate in the state. I do know that as we look more to the northern border, we've had some interest from some Canadian-based providers who are looking to expand and operate in Maine. And so, you know, on the other side of that, some New Hampshire, Massachusetts providers who are also interested in expanding into Maine. So I just want to say that because I think it's really easy to just think about the providers who we know, who we've known for the last 5-10 years, and think that that's it. But I do think that BEAD is an opportunity for potentially our ISP space to expand a little bit. So through the pre-qualification period, there will be just some pretty high level qualification requirements that are outlined in our proposal that anyone who is planning to bid will have to meet. They need to demonstrate that they can execute activities funded by federal, state, and local laws, that they have the financial and managerial capacity to meet the commitments of a subgrantee. They have the technical and operational capacity to provide services as promised. They have the operational capacity and strategy to provide direct municipal or tribal partnership. So that's really trying to get at the ability for an ISP to work in partnership with our communities and our tribal communities. They have to show a record of past compliance and plans to ensure ongoing compliance with federal labor and employment laws. They'll have to certify that they offer a low-cost plan that meets our requirements. They adhere to all state laws regarding net neutrality, collection of data, guarantee of privacy, and then various ownership information, right? Where do they operate? Do they have a UEI, etc. This is open to municipally owned networks, utility districts, ISPs, other forms of partnership for operating internet service, but they will have to meet all of these qualifications. If they do not meet a qualification, they cannot bid within the subgrantee selection process. So why I say, Sandy, to your question, it kind of depends on a model. The door is open for municipally owned networks. I think the bar is rather high with BEAD funding in particular and federal funding around administration and capacity and ability to meet the guidance that NTIA has put forward for us. I do think it's probably a little bit lighter of a lift for an existing municipally owned or publicly owned network. That said, that doesn't mean that if that is not the pathway that you are going down or you don't have access to those kind of network, doesn't mean you won't have a solution for the locations in your community. We are charged with identifying a solution for all remaining locations. Once we go through that pre-qualification process, that's after 60 days, which is our window, we will be able to open the application period. So the application period, which we are estimating to kick off in the fall and run through the winter, but the application period will go through our existing portal, and they'll have to provide technical narrative, profile, financial analysis, and as well as bid specifically on project service areas. So when they go into our platform, project service areas will exist. They have to select project service areas and commit to bidding on those. There is the possibility that we have project service areas that receive no bid, which we will have to address through negotiation, through altering the project service area, really through a lot of conversation to identify a solution for that area. We have to have a plan for no bid areas, especially if they have those unserved location, those 25/3. If we have no solution for a 25/3 location or less location, those unserved, we cannot fund the underserved locations. So we really have to get bids for all of the PSAs. If there is one bid and it comes in under the extremely high cost threshold, then that bid is most likely the bid that will move forward to solution. It has to meet a few criteria, right? We prioritize fiber connections through this program, especially if it falls under an extremely high cost threshold. If there are multiple bids, that's where our scoring criteria comes into play, and it's all outlined in the volume 2 initial proposal. Let me see here, and I will share and walk through it a little bit because I think this is an area of community intersection. Okay, so priority project. I'm going to share my screen again. Everyone can take a deep breath because I know this is a lot of information, and this is not the only time, like I can come back anytime. And we'll have webinars and more information that's a little more easily digestible. So you should be seeing this document with priority project criteria and weight at the top. We had a lot of guidance that we had to follow to develop the scoring. And so I want to be clear that there are two sections of scoring. There are priority project applications and there are non-priority project criteria and weight. And so I want to focus on the priority. Okay, I want to focus on the priority. And the reason I want to focus on that is that might be a little bit better to see. Is because this is really what we're aiming for, right? So a priority project application is a application proposal that comes in selecting a project service area and provides end-to-end fiber optic facilities for each end user. So if multiple priority project applications come in, so provider A or applicant A and applicant B are both offering fiber to the premise for a bid for a project service area, then we go through the scoring criteria that we outlined. So this is, pages 17 and on. In the primary scoring criteria, NTIA designated the following things that we had to score on as primary scoring criteria. The highest and first being minimal BEAD outlay. So basically, how far is the funding being stretched? They have to meet a baseline of subsidy amount for each PSA that's set by NTIA and their subcontractors. And then they get a half point for each percentage that they come in higher. So the more funding that they're bringing to the table and the less funding that they're asking for us, the more points that they receive. It's a little different from how we scored Connect the Ready, Reach Me, and what folks are a little bit more experienced with, where we were asking for a percentage. Now we're kind of setting a threshold and saying, if you come in, this is the cost of the location. If you come in under it, for every dollar you come in asking less of our money, you get more points. Affordability. Being able to provide a $90 per month or lower for a gig over a gig. The reason we two reasons for basing it on a gig symmetrical. One, NTIA says that we have to. Two, it actually makes it a lot easier for us because in the past, when we've tried to base affordability plans on 100 over 100, it was really difficult to compare apples to apples when we have some providers whose baseline is higher than 100 over 100. For example, GWI's lowest service tier is 250 over 250, and they don't have 100 over 100. So while the cost was adequate and matched our affordability, the service level was higher. The gig symmetrical gives us a pretty good target for comparing across all providers that would be coming into this. the last piece of the primary scoring is fair labor practices at 10 points. And all of this criteria comes directly from the federal government. Adherence to Davis-Bacon, being able to employ workforce subcontractors based in Maine, prevailing wages, local hire provisions, use of labor peace agreements, commitments to union neutrality. That is how they defined primary scoring. It is where the bulk of the points are. Then in secondary scoring criteria, we have speed and scale of deployment. We tried to create something around speed and scale deployment that kept with strong timelines and aggressive timelines under BEAD, but didn't outright favor an incumbent provider. We do want to make sure that, or our smaller providers across the state, right, who maybe don't have large footprints. Give me just one second. No, you may not. Sorry, my son has arrived. The additional prioritization factors is the last scoring area, and it has kind of several points in it, but the largest amount of points within this area is the local and tribal coordination. So there are 8 points, and this is based on the ability to demonstrate engagement with local and tribal governments. So within the selected project areas, it's the responsibility of the ISP to reach out to those communities and engage them through this process. This includes meetings, this includes working with regional tribal broadband partners. Yours is here with the Island Institute and Amber. They'll have to follow a template that we will create, haven't yet, but we'll create, that prove to us that there is quality engagement, partnership that is sustained long-term. They'll receive the full 8 points if they can demonstrate that they followed this engagement, and and we receive expressions of support from multiple communities. As we go down, they'll receive less points as either that engagement shifts or we receive explicit opposition from a minimum threshold of impacted communities. Again, these project service areas can be go across multiple communities. And we wanted to make sure that there was a way in which the communities could say, we do not want this provider, right? They may have outreach to us, we talked with them, but we want to put our full support, our full 8 points behind provider A versus provider B. It was really important to us that communities had the ability to do that. In this section, we also see digital equity and inclusion objectives, offering a low-cost plan, being able to commit to serve all of the CAIs, which are community anchor institution, as well as MDUs. Those continue to be an area of concern and struggle across the state, especially when we see campground, not just your typical multi-dwelling units that you think of in terms of apartment complexes, duplexes, condos, but also campgrounds, right? Where you're leasing out lots of land, but the location might just be one address. Workforce development, job quality, open access and competitive market incentive. Again, this was trying to balance that. It's also 3 points similar to what we saw with speed to deployment, because we're trying to balance some of the really characteristics of our larger, more regional or national providers with some of our larger or smaller ISPs, Maine-based ISPs. And we fear that by not having a good balance within the scoring, much of this would favor some of our larger providers or naturally incumbent providers. I'm gonna pause for a moment and see if anybody has questions. I think there's another piece around this scoring that's really good for you all just to understand about the dynamic between priority and non-priority. But I will stop sharing for a moment so that we can see each other and just ask if you have any questions. And I apologize if you can hear my son. I never know if people can hear it. I can hear it. So I'm always a little stressed that maybe you all can hear it maybe more than you can hear me.
Kendra Joe, I would just pick up from Sandy's question earlier. So I think as a committee, we've kind of accepted the fact that we're probably not going to end up with a municipally owned solution here. We're probably just going to end up with a provider, an established provider, building a network and owning and operating it for the most part. So operating under that assumption, it sounds like there's really not a lot of involvement that is required with the communities other than these documents of support following on engagement for a provider to come in and do a project here. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, so the way that this is designed is to do a couple things. Take the weight of planning and engagement off, or community-driven engagement off of the communities, recognizing that, you know, for you all, you have a committee and you have capacity. There are lots of places across the state where we have to target with these funds that have a high density of locations that have never engaged in the broadband space, or potentially don't have the political will to engage in the broadband space and have a committee. So that's a little bit why the burden is on both MCA, but on the ISPs. You know, if they want a full 8 points, they're not only going to have to engage the community, they're going to have to win the community over. The other side of that is trying to create an opportunity for communities to plug in at the right time in the process. And whether that's a committee or a municipal official or a town manager, right, plug in and be, you know, kind of a light touch, but direct those points where they should go. Again, that's on us to do that engagement or our regional tribal broadband partners. And so where you are not looking at a municipally owned network, the weight of application, planning, design, feasibility, modeling, those types of things, that is definitely off your plate. Still, there will be projects, I'm going to assume, because I know your area enough, right? There will be project service areas, one or plural, in your area. There will be a need for really focused engagement and review of the bids that come in to be able to dedicate those points.
Okay. And then my other question was, and I understand you said it'll be August at the board meeting before any of the PSA data is made official in public, but I was curious if there is any information about this area that you know of in a draft form right now, understanding that it may change. It's nothing set in stone. What those PSAs look like for this area.
There's nothing I have right now, partly because I'm not the staff member that has the powers to have access to it at the moment. But what I can do is follow up with Megan after this conversation and see if she can give me a little bit more understanding. I will say that one of the things coming out of like the Get Ready work and just knowing where we have active community participation and where there's already been a lot of effort or conversations with providers, we are trying to have that inform those PSAs, right? We don't want to have to break up communities in different PSAs if we don't have to. And so where we know that there's been regional collaboration or especially in your case, like a push from the industry, the private industry, to have a regional approach because of the way the infrastructure is already built there. We want to make sure that we're using as much information as we already have to inform those PSAs. I think when we started, I'm probably gonna get this number wrong, but it demonstrates just how high the number is. When we started, I think Megan Grable, who's our data analyst, her first take put us at over 700 PSAs or project service areas across the state, right? She's gotten that number down, but there's still a lot. We're not talking 20 project service areas here. We're talking hundreds of project service areas that will be bid on. And then those bids will, especially we'll have providers that come in for multiple PSAs. Those will be all captured into one contract, but they will have to bid on several PSAs.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I look forward to whatever information you can forward on.
Yeah, I think especially where or when we have multiple bids, and so I'm gonna share my screen again, and feel free to like raise a hand and let me know if I'm talking way too much, because I don't want to blow up your whole agenda, but this is pretty dense stuff. So I'm gonna share my screen one more time, because what I want to point out, so as I mentioned, and I just walked you through that priority, the priority project criteria. And as I said, the priority project criteria are proposals that are bringing end-to-end fiber optic facilities, so fiber to the premise, right? If the non-priority project criteria scoring is similar scoring, but it only comes into play if we have no fiber to the premise applications. If we have, so the way I like to break this down, and this is very much simplifying a more complex process, but if we have two bids and they're both fiber to the premise, then we go through the scoring I just walked you through, right? They're both apples and apples because they're both fiber to the premise. They both fall under our priority project criteria. Then that scoring comes into play. If we have two bids that one is fiber to the premise and one is coaxial cable, wireless, satellite, any other technology that is not fiber optics, has the ability to bring symmetrical service to a community, the fiber application will win out because that is our priority project criteria. If two bids come in and they are both not fiber to the premise, it could be wireless and cable, it could be both wireless, right? But neither of them are end-to-end fiber optics, then our non-priority project criteria comes into play. So I wanted to clarify that, because while all of the scoring is, it's weighty, it's complex, at the core of this, we want to ensure that we're bringing sustainable, reliable infrastructure, right? Scalable infrastructure into these investments, and fiber being that priority technology at this time.
Okay, Tom, it looked like you had a question.
Yeah, it's probably not too significant right now, but back at your criteria, how did the max, like $90 a month and lower than that, where did that come from?
So the for the gig symmetrical service, so the $90 per month is based on the federal benchmark for affordable service. And I can get that information for you. I wanted to see if it's outlined here. There aren't a lot of benchmarks around internet connectivity and costing. Recent with the ACP was the first time the federal government started to set affordability or define affordability, right? And that criteria. So we use the federal benchmarking that I believe the FCC puts out to acknowledge what a pricing structure should be. We have to be careful not to just pick a number. We have to have the data backing it, because internet connectivity is not regulated, right? We have no authority to rate regulate. And so we want to make sure that we're not getting into a situation where we're doing something that we legally cannot do.
And to clarify, I mean, you're not your benchmark of $90 for a gigabit service is not saying that that's an affordable plan, but that's a common denominator across most applicants, potential applicants, who probably, many of them do offer more affordable plans, but that's just to have an apples to apples comparison for them, correct?
Yes, so I want to be clear, so, right, so our, so in our affordability, we say, you know, a gig, at $90 a month. So applicants will receive 1 point for every dollar less than $90 per month, right? So that's our cap. So an example of that scoring, how that scoring kind of works out, and that's how a lot of this scoring breakdowns are. If they come in with a gig symmetrical service at $90, 0 points, right? They've met our threshold. For every dollar less, they receive points. So if they're come in at $75 for a gig, 15 points. If they come in at $65 for a gig, 25 points, right? So the scoring, from a strategy standpoint, the scoring and an eligible applicant wanting to get as many points as possible will drive the decisions that they're making around their approach.
And I just see Bob is unmuted. Did you have anything you wanted to?
Well, yeah, we had a grand total of 2 responses. One was coaxial, one was fiber. So would the coaxial proposal be automatically eliminated as being
So,
non-compliant?
sure. So if those providers were to bid through our through our subgrantee selection process and bid in the exact way that they proposed to you, right,
Mhm.
then you'd have a priority and a non-priority applicant. The priority applicant, the fiber to the premise, would be the awarded or the recommended to award applicant. I will
Okay.
say, and I'm going to make assumption. Well, I don't need to make assumptions. I do know who your respondents were, right? We have a history. We already have a grant history with Spectrum, who is one of our 2 cable providers in Maine that are active. They have applied and gone through an MCA program in which they responded with a design and a build that was fiber to the premise. And they are doing that it was through our Reach Me program. So very easily, the coaxial HFC network that was submitted to you all might turn into a fiber to the premise proposal that's submitted to us, given the structure of this scoring and competitive nature. So I will just say that the application that we received for Reach Me with Charter, I think it was 14 towns across the state for line extensions, that was a fiber to the premise proposal, and that is what they are building, is fiber to the premise. And they have to update their infrastructure along the way between central office or backhaul, middle mile central office. At any point that already is coaxial cable, they have to upgrade it to fiber in order to do fiber to the premise for the locations that they are awarded for. Doesn't mean that they're overhauling their entire network. I will say I'm currently a Spectrum customer, right? It doesn't mean that they are going to change what I have. But if there was a location near me that was funded with state funding, this funding, and they proposed fiber, that premise has to have end-to-end fiber to the home.
Okay, thank you.
So it really
So
just depends
things
on
are
how much they
changing,
want the
right?
business.
Yep. I mean, again, like all these PSAs, and it's why we're seeing a lot of activity already happening. We have a lot of providers who, while they might participate in BEAD, they're also trying to be first to market, right? They're trying to think of their business model. And if they have the investment and funding to try to do upgrades or expansions now with their own private investment, they'll do it. Because why wait for a competitive application process and some unknowns if you can prioritize an area. So, and I do think that, so case in point to that, Bob, you know, where we're already seeing some strategic changes in providers that are operating in Maine, I think we'll continue to see that as they look at how they can be as competitive as possible under BEAD.
I just want to jump in here real quick. I know Sandy has a time commitment and we've got one agenda item that is specific to her here. I don't know how much more information you wanted to present, Kendra Jo, but I think the PSA information for me was sort of the key thing. So I think that's until there's more information that becomes public, I think you've really given us a good overview of certainly what I was hoping to hear today. Is there anything else that you think is really important to hit on?
Yeah, there's one other thing, has nothing to do with BEAD, that I want to hit on that Amber flagged for me, so I want to make sure that I get to it. Again, ask me back, or I'll ask myself back. So like as those PSAs come out, as more information is confirmed, happy to come back, happy to have conversation with you all or a mixture of you and select boards, whatever that need is, happy to do it. I wanted to share an opportunity a funding opportunity that is coming up. It's just emerging, so we're starting to track it. I don't
Sure.
have all of the information on it, but it has to do with technical assistance. This is from, make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. Yes, this is from USDA Rural Development. It's broadband technical assistance. This is the second round of broadband technical assistance that has been allocated through the USDA. And it really is just a financial assistance opportunity for both providers of technical assistance and I guess like doers of technical assistance, applicants of technical assistance, to seek some more flexible planning, data collection, engineering feasibility, design, funding. Its eligible entities include tribes, state and local governments, nonprofits, but we are starting to go through this. I'll put the link in the chat for you all to dig into it if you'd like. But really, I think why it's good for you all to know is if you were wanting to continue to plan around broadband, maybe not leave it up to BEAD, do more community engagement, or look towards other models, or even work through franchise agreements and collect a bit more data. This might be a funding opportunity for you or a regional collaborative to look to. As you look in here, there's fact sheet. They outline some different opportunities for use around facilities and preparation of reports and studies and services, as well as what previous funding looked like. There's no match requirement. This is kind of purely federal funding for planning and kind of everything that isn't those infrastructure connections. So just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of it. You could look through this and say, we're not interested. I don't know what the administrative burden or reporting looks like for this funding. It's one of the questions I have out right now to the USDA folks to understand. But yeah, just wanted to make sure that we put that in front of you if there was any interest. I know that you all have sought some planning dollars in the past as you've worked through this and wanted to flag another opportunity if you thought it was of need or viable.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sandy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's fine. I was just waiting to check on the agenda item.
Yes, okay then. Well, thank you again, Kendra Jo, and absolutely we'll ask you back. When is the date of your board meeting when that will be public?
August 9th is our board meeting,
Okay,
and I can make sure that that you all have the information once it becomes
yep,
available. And all of our board meetings are recorded as well.
okay, excellent. And if we meet at the end of August, then we would have access to new information. So that may be what we plan on. So perfect. Until then, next on here, Winter Harbor website management funding. And this was a request from Sandy after our outreach meeting to to find a way to help facilitate updating the Winter Harbor Town website to include, at the very least, information relevant to broadband expansion, the work that we've been doing. So take it away, Sandy.
I have 2 minutes. They're booting me out. So the proposal would be to authorize for the Scoodic Peninsula Broadband Committee to authorize up to $500 maximum use in the next 6 months for the town of Winter Harbor to use in website updates by having a professional assist with that. We talked at the last meeting that Goldsboro has already received $500 for administrative in other areas for broadband committee, so that this would be an equal share to the town of Winter Harbor in an area that's lacking. That would include updating the town of Winter Harbor website with newsletter information, the link to Scoodic Peninsula Broadband, the minutes, the committee member names, similar to what town of Goldsboro already has on their website, and Winter Harbor just hasn't had the capacity to get done. So I would ask that there would be a motion to accept up to a $500 allotment for the town of Winter Harbor to hire services to have that work updated on their website.
Any thoughts, anyone?
Yes.
Tom? And we do have the funding available from the prior grant rounds to do so.
Well,
I'm
point I would, excuse me if I may, Roy,
Mhm.
the Winter Harbor website has not been upgraded, touched, new information in quite some time.
Yep.
So it really needs to be updated severely,
Yep.
so.
Tom,
I'm inclined to go with the funding.
Tom?
Yeah, I think it sounds reasonable.
Okay.
Yep.
And we'll leave the sourcing of the assistance to Winter Harbor. They'd need to find the person to work with them,
Yeah.
but we can just help support them. All right, so anyone want to make that a motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Motion and a second to authorize up to $500 to support Winter Harbor website updates for broadband over the next 6 months. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All those in
Nope.
favor?
Aye.
All right, there we go.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you later.
All right.
Thanks, Sandy.
All right. Nothing else that actually really needs a vote here, and it may not be anything that transpires until after we have more bead information. I think it would be, at this point, we know a little bit more, but it amounts to when we will know even more. We know we'll know more in August. So, but I think it would be important for us to, once we have a clear picture of what the service areas are going to look like, the project service areas, to then go to the select boards and just explain what looks like is coming down the pipeline in a more concrete way. I don't know that it makes sense to try and to meet with them before we have that information. Does that make sense?
Somewhat. I'd be curious to see what Spectrum's position is on going fiber to the premise, especially for this area.
Well, we'll find out when they have to make an application.
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, so from what Kendra Jo said, if there is let's say, for example, the service area includes the entirety of Goldsboro and Winter Harbor. Just if there is one fiber application and 3 non-fiber applications, it sounds like fiber's going to get it no matter what.
Sure.
And then it's really not, it's not on the towns to I mean, there'll be engagement, but the towns won't have to do much of anything. They're basically
Well-
just going to put the fiber up on the poles, it sounds like.
It probably, but the financial considerations though for, like for Consolidated Electric there, uh, putting a bond issue in front. So that's something to work, that would be needed to be worked on.
If they're not gonna be, if the communities don't have to fund it, then
Right.
no.
Well, yeah, I would hope. I hope that would be the case.
That's the idea behind this, is the funding will come
Right.
from,
Yeah, no, I get that, but if Consolidated says, well, we want to do this, this, and this, and it's like, I guess what we need is the final blessing on that, the final say.
so, I mean, I could envision, say, for example, if Consolidated happens to be an applicant and they're proposing fiber, say they're
Mhm,
the winning provider. If they don't plan to build to all the areas that we want built, like
mhm,
right now. You're welcome. Thanks for, okay, she's gone. If they don't plan to build to all of the areas that we want built, then I could
mhm,
see there being a space for the communities to negotiate and perhaps enter into some sort of funding arrangement to expand the project that they're proposing to MCA.
mhm.
Uh, But I think that would be the only area, from my understanding of what has been discussed, that there would be any community raising of funds or organizing of funding for this project. Uh, That, that's my understanding of it.
I would still
Agree.
probably want some assurance from them that for the bulk of it, what you're stating is that would be the case.
Well, and I think probably even Kendra Joe could answer that question.
Mm,
Because if that's like she said, this is taking the organizing, the planning, all of the work off of the plates of the communities if it's not going to be municipally uh, a municipal broadband district.
mhm.
So if that's the case, if we're not planning it, we're not executing it, we're not doing any of those things, we're also not paying for it. But yeah, we
Yes,
can definitely get clarification.
yeah, I'd like that. I really
Yeah.
would.
Yeah. Um,
So, Roy, do you think anything needs to go back to the towns at this point in time, the select boards or anything? To just let them know we're on a holding pattern?
I think probably just a brief communication to say that as of right now, the service areas, the project service areas that will be developed through BEAD funding are going to be tentatively made public in August, and that we will have more information once that has been released. And I think at that point, then it would make sense to, you know, now we can send out that heads up to the select boards. And
Mm,
then once we have that information, we've had a chance to discuss it. Again, like I'm saying, I mean, I don't think we'd have anything to discuss and meet about until we get that. So I would say we make our next meeting the end of August, when we can digest the BEAD information that's released.
mhm.
And then we can plan what we want to communicate to the select boards in more detail at that time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely.
Okay. So I can definitely do the outreach to the select boards. Do you know, Bob, did you have an election back earlier this month for a new select board
Yeah,
member?
yeah, I think there was, and what is his name? Hemingway.
Okay. I don't think I know him.
I think he was a previous select board member years ago,
Okay.
ran just now, and he won. He won by one vote.
Ooh,
Yeah.
So
that was sweet.
you still got Gordon Harrington on there?
I am not sure.
Was
I
it
just
Kit?
picked up. Go ahead.
It was Kit Rivers, whose seat was up, correct?
Honestly, I don't know.
All right. Well, I can find out. That's easy
Mhm.
enough. I can reach out to Kathy. Um, Tom, you had elections as well, right? In Goldsboro.
Yeah, we've got a couple new ones, I guess.
Okay.
Oh, no, one got reelected and then we have another new one. Yeah.
Okay. And it was, I think Bob
Okay.
Harmon was his seat, one of the
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah, he's reelected.
Okay. Trying to think. You had Jackie Weaver, you had Peter McKenzie, Danny Mitchell, Dana, and Bob before.
Actually, I guess they both Danny and just happened and now I'm all of a sudden forgetting myself, but I think
That's-
both Danny and Bob got reelected.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that'll be an
I don't know.
that'll be an easy group for me to communicate with, I guess. So. Okay.
The two, Kendra put a couple of things in the chat.
Hmm.
Can you capture those and put them in the minutes? So
Yep, I
we get
will add,
those?
I will add those because I get the transcript of the chat as well, so,
Okay,
and I don't know about, the that additional aid program personally, where we still have some funding sitting around that we haven't touched. I don't, I hate to turn down money, but I also I feel like we probably don't need to apply for money if we've got plenty right now in the first place.
Mm.
I've never had extra money personally, but also I want to make sure that we're not just claiming stuff that we don't actually need. But that's me.
yeah. Yeah, I want to take a look at that, the requirements to get it, whatnot.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, so let's look at a calendar here. August. Looks like August 28th is the last and fourth Wednesday. So I don't know if that works for people. It seems to have worked for the majority of us to stick to the Wednesdays at
Yep.
4.
Yeah,
Why don't we
all
pencil?
4 of us.
I just wonder if Mike is not checking his
well,
Gmail because I know that's
I know he's away right now, so
okay.
I don't know where, but
Well, we can plan for August 28th at 4 p.m.
Yep.
I'll communicate that out and we'll go from there. And perhaps that, like we said, hopefully Kendra Jo will be able to forward information on to us as it becomes available. And then when they have their meeting, it should all be public and maybe she can come back and expand at that point when information is official.
Sounds good. It sounds good.
All right. Then I think that covers us for today. And honestly, it didn't take all that much longer. So
Yep. Do you need a motion to adjourn?
I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Take
August.
care.
All right. You too. Take care now.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.